Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church, and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms, Switch TV Kenya, Joel Church M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Church. Send in an SMS via 111 444 111. But first, here are stories making headlines. The murder of a young white farmer worker sparks a tense standoff between farmers and supporters in South Africa's agricultural heartland. Schools in Rwanda reopen after nearly 8 months closure to curb the spread of COVID-19. A project by residents of a Tunisian town to make a mass exit by sea to Italy in protest of sanctions at their football club. Starting off in the corridors of justice, a Kenyan court sentenced 2 men to 18 years in prison for conspiring with the Al-Shabaab extremist who killed 67 people at Nairobi's Westgate shopping mall in 2013. Al-Shabaab attacked the mall, shooting at anyone who was moving, killing both women and children.
A Kenyan court has handed prison terms of 33 and 18 years respectively to 2 men for conspiring with the Al-Shabaab extremists who killed 67 people at Nairobi's Westgate shopping mall in 2013. Muhammad Ahmed Abdi and Hassan Hussein Mustafa, both 31, were found guilty on October 7th of conspiring with and supporting the 4 assailants from the Somali-based jihadist group who died in what was the Kenya's worst terrorist attack in 15 years. Chief Magistrate Francis Andani sentenced the pair to 18 years for conspiracy and 18 for supporting extremists, but ordered both terms to be served together. Abdi was also given an additional 15 years for 2 counts of possessing jihadist propaganda material on his laptop. He will serve 26 years and Mustafa 11, taking into account the 7 years they have already spent behind bars. The convicted men were in regular contact with the gunmen who at midday on September 21, 2013, stormed the upscale Westgate Mall in the Kenyan capital and began throwing grenades and firing indiscriminately on shoppers and business owners. Although there was no specific evidence the convicted pair had provided material help, the court was satisfied their communication with the attackers amount to supporting the armed rampage and justified the guilty verdict for conspiracy. The marathon trial began in January 2014. A third accused was acquitted of all charges. The attack was claimed by Al-Shabaab in retaliation for Kenya intervening military over the border in Somalia, where the Islamist group was waging a bloody insurgency against the fragile central government. Harriet Chimea, Switch TV.
A project by residents of a Tunisian town to make a mass exit by sea to Italy in protest at sanctions on their football club has been delayed because of bad weather. The Tunisian Football Federation on October 17th slapped a 1-year ban on CS Cheba, officially over an incomplete and late membership application. The Sports and Youth Ministry vowed to work for a solution acceptable to CS Cheba and taking into account economic and social hardships in Tunisia.
Tents have been erected at Cheba Port for people to register for the crossing on an armada of more than 200 boats, with whole families signed up as well as youths from disadvantaged regions in the country's interior such as Kasserine.
We have been in this situation for 14 days, which means that the fans of Cheba team are in a state of anger. Let us all go to Italy and bring with us our youth and the players of the Cheba team, since the country forbids it from existing. This is why we decided to migrate collectively.
The club's president has for months been at odds with the federation's chief, Wadijari, especially after Facebook posts criticizing the TFF financial dealings.
Collective migration is no longer a choice, but we are forced to do so as it is our last attempt to protest and to show the authorities that we are serious. We demand a serious intervention from their behalf.
Hundreds of angry fans have taken to the streets of Cheba, blocking roads and setting tires on fire in protest at the suspension.
Are the officials in this country abiding by the law? We can clearly see that they are not, so they shouldn't blame us for not respecting the law. We all intend to immigrate, and we will do so when the weather conditions are good, so we do not risk the lives of our people.
Illegal sea crossings to Europe from Tunisia have been on the rise, largely driven by economic woes after a 2011 popular revolution that many hoped will bring change. With unemployment now topping 18%, almost 12,000 migrants reached Italy in illegal crossings between 1st of January and 26th of July. Kennedy Kimani, Africa Focus.
Our focus now to matters education. Primary and secondary students have returned to school in Rwanda after nearly 8 months closure to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Classes restarted in the Notre Dame High School in the capital Kigali, which reopened after education institutions nationwide are shut on March 22nd.
Normally we have more students in class, but today we have half of what we had before the coronavirus epidemic. It looks like the students were on vacation and they need to be reminded of everything. Some of them remember better than others.
To be honest, I feel a little nervous because it's not easy to come back to school after 7 months of vacation. But suddenly you get used to it and pick up the pace little by little.
On reprend le rythme scolaire petit à petit. Bon, se laver les mains, prendre la température.
Washing hands, taking temperatures, we have tabs, and when they eat, when they study, when they sleep, there is enough distance not to infect one another. And if there is a case, we have isolation rooms.
Et s'il y avait un cas, nous avons des chambres d'isolement.
Elsewhere, parched fields stretch as far as the eye can see on plains overlooking Agadir in southwest Morocco as precious water resources are diverted from the drought-hit agricultural heartland to households. For the past 3 years, the region has been struggling with a drought that has excavated water resources and prompted authorities to make a painful choice.
A lot of farmers stopped their activities after the water was cut off by the dam. All the crops they had dried up, the beans, the clementines, all of them dried up. This year's crops, because October is citrus harvest month, and that's over. If there was water, I could cultivate my land, but there is no water. The cooperative has only one well, and that is not enough for the 60 members. Everyone needs 10 hours of irrigation per day, and that's not enough. My land needs a lot of water. The last 3 years have been characterized by a very pronounced drought, which means that the water reserves at the level of the dams today are at a very low level. Historically, we have never seen such low levels on a basin scale, so this is worrying data. The impact of this drought on groundwater resources is also very pronounced. The water level is decreasing all the time, and there are also springs that have practically dried up.
Shifting gears now to matters politics, thousands of residents of Abidjan, the economic capital of the Ivory Coast, have left the city and head for the interior, fearing deadly violence during the presidential election. Many Ivorians are worried about a potential repeat of the 2010-2011 post-election crisis when fighting turned the city into a battleground and left 3,000 dead.
When fighting broke out between rival Ivorian factions 10 years ago, Veronique Yao left it late to flee Abidjan to her hometown, a 3-hour drive. 2 days before Ivory Coast's Saturday election, she was taking no chances. Yao and her young son packed their suitcases and joined other passengers jostling onto buses out of Abidjan, fearing a repeat of the 2010-2011 crisis when fighting turned the city into a battleground and left 3,000 dead.
I am leaving Abidjan because of what happened in 2010. I do not want to go through that again.
President Alassane Ouattara's decision to run for a third term has been rejected by the opposition, triggering sporadic clashes between rival communities. In Abidjan, some are fleeing the city, others are preparing to hunker down and stock up on provisions.
Considering what's happened in the past years, I'm really worried because at the moment I'm living alone and I don't really know what's going to happen. So I'd rather go back to my family, it is better.
At least 30 people have died in clashes of Ouattara's third term, mostly in the south, between local ethnic groups and Diallo communities seen as close to the president, himself a Muslim from the country's north.
It must be acknowledged that over the last 5 days there has been a significant number of travelers.
Ivory Coast emerged from a civil war after 2002 that left the country split into two, the north held by rebels and the south controlled by the then president Laurent Gbagbo. Ouattara won a long-delayed 2010 vote, but Gbagbo refused to leave power as the country slid into fighting between his forces and Ouattara's loyalists.
Many Ivorians, or at least many people from Abidjan, are getting out of the area of the city, which they feel is a little too tense given the current socio-political situation.
Social media has not helped. Rival accounts spread accusations of weapons arriving in Abidjan or recycled images from past violence. The opposition claims Ouattara's government has unleashed gangs of young thugs labeled microbes on their rallies, a charge he dismisses by accusing his foes of attacks. Violence has been sporadic for now. At least 4 towns in the south saw clashes between communities, often during opposition rallies that ended in tit-for-tat attacks, looting and burning homes in rival neighborhoods. Nighttime violence in Niao's Abidjan neighborhood left several cars in flames. Who was involved was not clear, but it was enough for her to pack up and leave the next day. Lincoln Ombogo, AfricaFocus, Switch TV.
Meanwhile, the NGO Dialogue Initiative and Research Action for Peace, that is Indigo, which deployed observers to Ivory Coast during the presidential election, reports that 23% of polling stations remain closed all day. Opposition leaders have already dismissed the election as a failure, and several opposition figures, including exiled former rebel chief Guillaume Soro, announced they no longer recognized Ouattara as president. The Ivorian leader says a constitutional reform, or rather constitutional court ruling, approved his third term, allowing him to reset the country's 2-term presidential limit according to a 2016 reform.
Indigo Ivory Coast notes that 23% of polling stations nationwide were closed all day.
Un nombre important de villes et de villages à travers le pays.
A significant number of towns and villages throughout the country were the scene of violent confrontations between people on the one hand and between people and the police on the other. This shift of political violence to the community level is undoubtedly one of the main factors to be considered throughout the electoral process.
L'un des principaux facteurs à considérer tout le long de ce processus. 391 incidents ont été
391 incidents were recorded and verified on Election Day by Indigo Ivory Coast. 5 incidents of violence against Indigo Ivory Coast observers were recorded.
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come. We look at Tanzania after elections. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Moving on, 3 decades after the fall of apartheid, the murder of a white farm manager has laid bare racial frictions that persist in South Africa, or rather in South Africa, weighed down by the triple challenges of rampant crime, unemployment and inequality. Take a look.
The murder of a young white farmer sparked a tense standoff between the farmers on the one hand and supporters of a farm-left political party on the other in the small town of Senekal in South Africa's agricultural heartland. Scattered groups of people hurled threats at each other in the streets around the court where 2 accused appeared from Brendan Horner's murder.
We are not here to talk, we are here to show physically enough is enough.
Julius Malema, leader of leftist opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, had a similar message as he addressed a large crowd behind the court.
We are here because white arrogance displayed itself on this street. We were here to confront it toe to toe.
White interest groups claim the white farmers are targeted because of their race. The government says it is a result of criminality. The Institute of Security Studies, a respected African think tank, highlights that farm attacks victims are from all race groups.
The demographics of our farming community is still predominantly white for historical reasons. But there are an increasing number of emerging black farmers, and I include colored and Indian farmers in that broad category. And of course, the workers on farms are predominantly black workers.
Because of their remote location, security on farms is a real challenge. Robert is a local farmer who benefited from land reform. His property has been targeted several times. Stock theft has become so frequent, he now limits the number of sheep he keeps.
From bad to worse now at the moment, because now the killing sometimes, they kill you. They don't just take your sheep or your stock only. The killing is also there.
22-year-old Brendan Horner's death might have ignited the most recent racial debate, but for those close to him, it is much more personal. He was found strangled and his body left in a field on the farm where he worked. It is harrowing. When something like this happens to you, you always hear that something happens to other people's employees. I never thought that something like this would happen to us. It was an absolutely harrowing day. Sadly, violent crime is all too common in South Africa. More than 21,000 people were murdered in 2019, according to the most recent statistics. Attacks on farms shake the tight kit. Communities in agriculture sector, a key component of the economy. But how to solve the problem of crime and inequality? Few have answers. Meanwhile, a next flashpoint seems inevitable.
Now, from the onset of the deadly airborne COVID-19 virus on December 2019, the use of face masks moved from being a medical request to a law-enforced rule. However, as much as the mask has become resourceful in protecting people from the spread of the disease, and as Daniel Karuki explains, the value market of both the disposable and non-disposable mask has dropped steadily in price from when a mask could cost around 200 shillings to a staggering 5 shillings in the Nairobi CBD. Take a look.
Green, yellow, white and blue are among the variety of colors of face masks being sold in Kenya in the fight against COVID-19. Up until a few weeks ago, the price of disposable and non-disposable face masks cost around 50 to 100 shillings or even more in many places. But now the price per mask has greatly dropped to between 10 to 5 shillings. Our N95 mask now ranges in price with a locally manufactured mask.
People prefer this za kuoshwa. Wanaona kununua kila saa. Na wanasema hii wakivaa inakatika na yezi rudiwa. So wana prefer hii yenye imeshonwa. Ndio wanaweza renew na kama economy imekuja chini, mfuko watu wengi imekuwa chini. So wana prefer ile yenye wanarudia.
According to local vendors within Kenya's capital, face masks and healthcare products were overpriced at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in March, especially after Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe on April 6 gazetted laws that make it a crime to be in public without face masks. Anyone found culpable risks a fine of 20,000 shillings or even 6 months in jail.
I think nowadays we just want to wear it so that you don't get caught by the cops.
Yes.
Yeah. So probably you just want to, somewhere crowded you are, then you just pick one and move.
A price of at least 50 pieces would go for at least 2,500 shillings when the virus hit the country, but now goes for about 400 shillings. The sudden drop in price of masks could majorly be attributed to the sudden drop on demands as compared to when the masks were on high demand at the start of the pandemic.
Hii mask ni 10 bob because kitambo ilikuwa very expensive. Ndio hata maana tulikuwa tunatake hii pandemic seriously. Lakini nowadays iko 10 bob, hata hujui quality yake na compared na kitambo. How safe we are as Kenyans. That is why hata tunaona better tukae hata bila mask.
According to Dr. Eva, a standard quality mask is not dictated by the price of the mask, but rather the material the mask is made of.
The cloth masks are not bad because if you are not going to the wards and it's just for protection, if you wear, you can get these cloth masks that are being made, and then of course you wash it regularly and let it dry in the sun. So, and of course, you may have the right mask, but if you don't wear it properly, then it is useless.
However, most Kenyans can now afford to wear a surgical mask after prices have dropped, a drop majorly attributed to an increased supply of the protective gear in the local market, particularly those made locally. Daniel Kariuki for Switch TV.
Meanwhile, let's focus on reactions and newspaper headlines in Tanzania's capital after President John Magufuli was re-elected in a landslide victory. Magufuli has been declared the winner with a crushing 84% of votes, while his Chama cha Mapinduzi ruling party took 97% of the 264 elected parliament seats. Tanzania's opposition has not agreed with the result of the vote yet.
Tanzania's opposition on Saturday called on supporters to take to the streets to protest President John Magufuli's landslide election victory, which it says was fraudulent, demanding a fresh vote. Magufuli was declared the winner Friday with a crushing 84% of votes, while his Chama cha Mapinduzi, the CCM ruling party, took 97% of the 264 elected parliament seats.
I'm happy with the results announced due to the fact that the election was free and fair. So the results that have been announced by the NEC make me happy. We got the right president whom we wanted to lead us in the next 5 years.
The country's two main opposition groups, Chadema of defeated presidential candidate Tundu Lissu and ACT Wazalendo, held a joint press conference in Dar es Salaam in which they denounced the election and called their supporters to action.
My expectations in these remaining 5 years is to see John Pombe Magufuli continue with the good work he started in his last regime, and also for him to fulfill all the promises he gave during his campaigns.
The opposition parties again asked the international community not to recognize the result. The result of presidential elections cannot be contested in Tanzania, although the parliamentary outcome can be challenged.
I'm really excited with the victory of Magufuli. He got his big victory because of the good and hard work he did in the past 5 years when he was in power. I personally am proud of him since he is a hard-working leader. That's why I'm happy.
The election took place with little monitoring from foreign observers, and most international media were unable to gain accreditation to cover voting on the mainland. Just 4 of the 50 parliamentary seats up for grabs on Zanzibar went to ACT Wazalendo. The CCM presidential candidate Hussein Ali Mwinyi was declared the victor.
Over 800 traders and mechanics are counting losses after fire raised down all their goods at Nyayo Market in Ngara here in Nairobi. And the cause of the fire is not yet known, but is suspected to have been caused by electrical fault. Andrew Kero fired the report.
The fire started at around 7 p.m. on Sunday, a situation which is suspected to have been caused by an electric fault.
The disaster left many business people with nothing from what was once their promising business and livelihood sources.
Tunalia vitu zetu zote, hakuna chenye tunaweza fanya. Tumesimama tu vile tumesimama hivi, soko imeungua yote.
Mnaelewa saa hii hata watu wengi wanakaa kwa nyumba kwa sababu ya COVID. Now we have a double problem.
The smoke filled the air as residents tried to put out the flames before the emergency services arrived.
Nilipokuja nilipata wazimamoto wamesha kuja, alafu kulikuwa giza, moto ilikuwa kubwa sana sikuweza hata kufika kwa kiwanja.
Malibroka moto pale, si kule soko yote, ama club padile na padile hapa malitusaidia.
Previous market fires in Nairobi have often blamed on private developers who seek to forcefully evict traders. Some traders are once again suspecting ill motive behind the incident. Meanwhile, the government, through State Member of Parliament Charles Njagwa and the Deputy County Commissioner, has already released 9 million Kenyan shillings to caution the traders from the losses incurred.
Na akasema ameongea na rais wetu, Mheshimiwa Rais Muigai Kenyatta, na akatoa milioni 9. Na yeye mwenyewe akasema ataongezea milioni 1 ikuwe 10.
The latest inferno at Ngara presents a grimmer picture of the future as the pandemic looms over the world and destabilizes incomes.
The stores used by the traders to house their trading materials were entirely destroyed in the blaze. And as the final flames go off, traders are worried of one thing. Is this the last of what has become the norm? Andrew Kero, Switch TV at Ngara Market in Nairobi.
Well, that's all on Africa Focus today, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms, Switch TV Kenya, Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV and Joel Chacha. My name is Joel Chacha, and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. My producers have been Hari Chimea and Nyakundi Kelvin, and also my director Simon Ngang. Until next time, do have yourself a great weekend.